about 4 years.
Oh, gee. Okay.
But if you got a good, dark male from Africa, he could last a lifetime working out in the fields. So they were worth a lot more money, and they stopped buying Irishmen, which was, it's just true. If you're curious about that and never heard about it, I suppose some people haven't. You could read White Cargo, Not Pants. I don't know what that is. I don't know what that is. But this. So, remember, slavery is actually worldwide. It's always been there pretty much. Even though we're proud of the fact that some European nations and the United States have done away with slavery officially, we actually have plenty of people, perhaps more slaves in the U.S. now than ever, imported and not allowed to go places, etc. That's, you could look that stuff up too. They might not be officially called slaves, but and then we have the expression wage slavery, which, remember, that's argumentatively, that's economically cheaper than owning a slave, because when you own somebody, you've got to take care of them, and that's expensive. Whereas if you just hire them for 5 to 9 on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday nights, you just have to pay them for those hours, and you could care less whether they get to eat, sleep, under a roof, any of that stuff. So it turns out that wage slavery turns out to be a much more economically feasible way of getting cheap labor. So this is pretty cool. And I think one of the reasons why, when I asked my mom, hey, what's our ancestors like and everything, why do you want to know that? They're all dead. That was my mom's, we could go back to grandparents and maybe great-grandparents, but that really didn't go much further than that, because no one kept track. Why, So that's fun. And why is that important when we're talking about John Locke? Because John Locke wrote the Constitution for, was it South Carolina or North Carolina? Or was it just the Carolinas? Which is named that because of King Charles. Carol is a variant of Charles. Carolingian. Charles. It's not my fault. But so anyway, he's as an assistant to the Earl of Shaftesbury, he's the one that writes the Constitution for the lands that the Earl of Shaftesbury owns in the colonies. So he's involved in that. And he's also the one who gives us the explanation of why you can own people. Basically.
Yeah, what laws do they give that one? Yeah.
This is really cool. If you're at war with somebody and you beat them, and you have the right to kill them because you've been in war with them, but you don't kill them, they're yours. They become your property.
Is the plot of an episode of Phineas and Ferb?
This is what he basically said. And in fact, I think the Irish didn't so much they did get beaten whenever they fought, practically. But they most often, I think, were sold into slavery either on their own or the parents sold them. Like lots of parents still today sell their children into slavery. Right? But if you think about it, the Irish sold themselves into slavery basically in order to get out of the situation they were in, hoping that where they would go would be better.
So would you say that he encouraged slavery, or did he encourage indentured servitude?
He did not encourage it, and it was slavery. It was the slave trade. He was not only the one who explained the reasoning behind that, but also involved in cataloging the slaves that were being transferred, etc. He was one of the accountants for that kind of thing, right? So yes, he was involved in that, and as a result of his experience with that, he came to hate it and changed his mind about it. So that's pretty, pretty interesting as well. But because of the conflicts going on in England, and the Earl of Shaftesbury ending up losing his position, Locke fled to the Netherlands, where he attached himself in preparation for the new king, William, and Mary, his wife, who were freeholders in the Netherlands, and cousins of the current King James, who was a Catholic and in trouble because he was trying to reimpose Catholicism on the country, and they were Protestant and Puritan. And so there was conflict that didn't resolve over the space of like 15 years. It got worse and worse and worse, till eventually the Parliament invited William and Mary, well, William, to come to England and become king. And James fled to Ireland, and then William came, and there was a battle. William was not involved in it, but there was a battle, and James lost and fled to France. And William and Mary become king. It's called the Glorious Revolution. Glorious because there was no real battle involved in that actual assumption of. But it is significant because that means that the Stuarts are gone, and we now have, what family is it? The Windsors? Yeah. Could just search on Google. That would probably be faster, actually. But I'm thinking that's where the Tudors came from. What was that? George was involved. Rich. Not giving me anything, is it?
The Tudors before the Stuarts. The Tudors were the other Henry.
The Tudors, that's right, the Tudors were, I'm thinking Windsors though. Yeah, the Henrys were Tudors. Tudorian, and the Stuarts. And then I'm thinking Windsors, and I can't think of any other name in that reign. But in any case, so he comes back with William and Mary, who become king, but they're not absolute monarchs, because now there's a shift. And what we have is a relationship between the Parliament, who wants a king as a chief executive, because the executive executes not only criminals, but the law. We still call it the executive branch, where we have the president and all of the president's support. Yes?
Google says Stewart.
It says Stuart. Stuart? Said the Stuart. I thought the Stuarts were gone.
It says, full name, William Henry of Orange and Mary Stuart.
But Mary Stuart was the source, right, of the relationship that enabled William to come to power, I think. But she wasn't the male.
After the Stuarts, it was the German House of Hanover, King George I. That's
Yeah. So that's something we have to go. I have to go look. Now that came up. We're going to stay with Stuart.
Lord of the Roses. It's a lot of history.
Oh yes. 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 Okay, but so, in any case, so he comes back with William and Mary. He actually sails on the ship with Mary. But in any case, now we have a new king and queen of England, and they're parliamentary. In other words, well, they're in power because of an agreement by the people to have a king and elect this king as our executive, right? And so instead of the divine right of kings where you've inherited the kingship because your parents were royalty, etc., or you're connected, etc., you instead now are the king because we appointed you, basically. And if you screw up, we can get rid of you. Same deal, right? No, we brought you in, we can take you out, right? So now you're a king, but you're a limited monarch. And you have people who have brought you in there to rule because they think you're the way to keep the monarchy in good shape, investing economically for the country, to keep peace, etc. And so when we look at the state of nature, you remember Thomas Hobbes, who imagined a state of nature that required us to form a government, because that state of nature was everybody against everybody, dog eat dog world, right? And so for Hobbes, the main point of having a government is security. And the best kind of security comes from an absolute monarch who has absolute power, and you surrender all your rights to that absolute monarch in exchange for the security that that new system will give you, right? Locke imagines a state of nature, but in that state of nature, actually things go pretty well, because mom keeps the village pretty well organized. Think of it this way, right? You know, there's love involved in our relationships. It's just that what tends to happen in the state of nature is that our human society gets too large and complex for mom to keep everybody well behaved. And so you end up needing a system. And so what you do is you start a social contract, right? So Locke is, again, just like Hobbes, a social contract philosopher as a political science, right? You're studying political science, it's a social contract philosophy. So the legitimating narrative, the story that we tell ourselves that says, yes, this is the right form of government, or the best form of government, or the government we ought to have, whatever, however you want to do that. The legitimating narrative, the story we tell ourselves that explains why this is the government for us, right, is a social contract that we agree to. And the social contract for Locke is not one where you give up all of your rights to the monarch. This is instead a social contract where you keep certain rights because they're unalienable. You don't lose them. And one of these is the right to life. So you have a right to your life. Keep in mind, he's talking about citizens. So you still have that slavery issue that's still there, right? And the wives, and the folks that live there but don't have property rights and stuff, etc. Right? So we haven't gotten to the point yet where we can say all people, all men are created equal, and mean it the way we would mean it today, right? But in any case, you have. I'm pointing to the screen and there's nothing there worth pointing to. But so you have a need for checks and balances between the different parts of the government. So in England, as he describes it, you need an executive that executes the law, and you need the legislative body which legislates, lege lex, the law, right, is created by this body and then enforced by this body, but you have checks and balances between those two bodies. So that you can't legislate things that, and by the way, in England, the executive not only includes the king, I should say the king now, I would almost say the queen, out of, about how many years of practice, 50? But, now we have King Charles III, right? If you look at them when they proceed in, as we probably will, for the coronation, which I don't know when that's coming up, right? Because even though he's the king, he hasn't had that official ceremony yet, right? And when he comes in, the justices are part of the executive in England. We have 3 different parts of our government in the United States, thanks to the Constitution. We have the executive, the legislative, and the judicial. And they're all separate, and even though there's an entanglement, on how they get into their position, et cetera, they have to be appointed, approved, and then they're justices. And can they be impeached? I don't think we've ever done that, actually, right? But the justices are another balance, a check on the other two, because they can say, oh, you can't pass that new law, it's unconstitutional. You can't give all students, remove their debt. They haven't decided that yet, but they sound like they're not quite persuaded, right? That the president can just do that. So the checks and balances thing comes from Locke's interpretation of the state of nature being replaced by a social contract, because the social contract has rules that these are rights that every member of the contract has, that they can't lose their right to life. You can't just take your life away. Liberty, you need your freedom. And what's the third one?
Property.
Property. That was a trick.
Pursuit of happiness is
But
in
you
the
got-
Constitution.
Yeah, that we had an interesting discussion, I guess, in the Constitutional Convention over whether, actually it was even the Declaration. Yeah, it was the Declaration in Philadelphia that all men, and in fact the very first penned version of it that Jefferson wrote was, all men have the right to life, liberty, and property. And that didn't fly, because all the folks that were there who had property said, whoa, 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 you're promising to give everybody property? Well, not mine. I'm keeping my property. They ended up, of course, opening up the frontier, saying, yeah, go get property. No one out there owns it, et cetera, right? You've heard that argument before. By the way, Locke's explanation for that, if you've ever seen the Disney movie Pocahontas, where the Europeans arrive and they start chopping down the trees and they start digging up the ground looking for gold and everything, and of course Pocahontas is running around singing. Should I play it? Should we do that?
Go for it.
Yes.
I don't see why not.
Yes.
Let me get rid of this, because I'll log out. It's probably just slowing us up.
I've just never seen this interesting. Yeah, I've revised the Constitution 2 to 3 times.
I literally just watched it the other day.
When is this over?
Terrible. 12.
Okay.